Good morning to all of you across the country. I am Dr. Jason Bolton, Vice President of Community Partnerships for the Help Group, and I will be moderating today's webinar titled Quality Distance Learning for Students with Special Needs. I am joined today by Carrie Borzello, Senior Director of Schools and Head of School of Summit View school parent Chris Johnson, Dr. Lori Stevens, Senior Director of Autism Programs, and Dr. Ellis Krasnow, Director of Online and STEM Education. Now you've heard a little bit about us, and we would like to know a little bit about you too. You should now see a short 4-question poll pop up on your screen. Please answer all of the questions. I'll give us a little bit of time to do that here. Okay, I see people are getting it in there. Thank you very much. I'll just wait a couple seconds here while folks get the poll done so we know about you. And I'll quickly summarize what I see. A few more seconds. Okay, it's starting to slow down. So what I see is we've got about 40% of our audience out here that you guys are parents with special needs children. Thank you very much for joining us. And we actually have quite a few teachers here as well, and some administrators, and a good deal of educational consultants as well. So we really appreciate you all tuning in. It looks like about 75% are from LA. We do have a couple participants from outside the United States and in other parts of California as well. We're excited to be expanding our reach beyond LA County by doing this webinar. While everyone's really here is to talk about distance learning, and I see that a few people had an extremely positive experience. About 30% had an overall positive experience in spite of the challenges, and we do have a good number of folks who were dissatisfied with their distance learning program. And then we just had to know how everyone was feeling today. There is certainly some anxiety. People have settled in. Some people are doing really well, and about half of you acknowledge that coping. Yeah, you're coping, but during these challenging times. So it's nice to know about you as well. And again, we thank you for coming on. We at the Help Group are honored that you have chosen to spend an hour with us as we share with you what we have learned about providing quality special education distance learning programs in our schools. Among other social service endeavors, the Help Group operates 16 non-public schools in Los Angeles and Orange County in California, serving students with autism spectrum disorders, learning disabilities, ADHD, developmental delays, and emotional challenges. We contract with more than 80 local education authorities to provide special education and related services to more than 1,400 students. Like many schools in the country, on March 19th, after local and state guidance, we pivoted our instructional practices to a distance learning and remote services delivery model. While we were able to take advantage of some virtual platforms already used in our classrooms, such as Google Classroom, and we had a couple of days to get organized, we launched a comprehensive plan to best meet the needs of our students, acknowledging that we would be learning about best practices as we were implementing our ideas. We knew that we were building the plane as we were flying it. But we were also clear that we were not just going through the motions. We were committed even then to quality special education. In relatively short order, one of our schools, Summit View School, was recognized by the National Association of Independent Schools as providing a model distance learning program. We are convinced that by adopting a growth mindset, the trust that we could adapt and develop our program to approach this challenge led to our success in quickly implementing a quality program. We were committed to doing the best we could and knew that we would continue to learn and need to tweak our plans to meet the needs of our students. We were aware the approach would be iterative from the beginning. We also knew that we needed to do our best to encourage our students, their families, and the larger community to embrace a similar mindset for this to work. We all had to be invested in a forward-thinking, positive approach to make the best tasting lemonade out of the lemons we had been handed. Between the middle of March and the beginning of June, we received feedback from families, including information from 2 surveys we sent out that informed both the work we were currently doing and our plans for the likely future that we would be continuing in a similar model for much longer than the end of the school year. These data and other qualitative feedback clearly indicated what the challenges were that we would need to intentionally address as we further developed our model. Number 1, issues associated with using a virtual model with non-independent and less independent learners. Number 2, issues associated with students who are less motivated to focus on school. Number 3, issues associated with students who struggle with attention or are easily distracted. Number 4, the need for a different kind of parental support for distance learning than for traditional education. Number 5, the need to provide organized opportunities for peer socialization. And 6, especially for students with special needs, the complications in individualizing and differentiating instruction to meet the unique needs of each student in a virtual model. To tackle these important challenges, the help group established and committed ourselves to meeting 4 standards in designing our distance learning programs: engagement, individualization, communication, and equity. Among other aspects of each of these standards, we committed ourselves to live and lively daily instruction and social, service, and parent engagement opportunities. We designed assessments for all students to determine their unique needs above and beyond those indicated in the IEP within a virtual environment. We have organized ongoing and predictable opportunities to communicate directly with parents, both individually and in larger groups. And critically important, we created an assessment of technical resources for each student so we can best ensure equitable access to the curriculum. Our initial student technology evaluation led to the help groups purchasing more than 180 laptops and internet hotspots for students who required them, representing about 15% of our student population. Today, you will hear from 3 school leaders from the help group and 1 parent about living examples of how we are implementing quality distance learning for students who need the specialized education of a non-public school. As we talk today, you'll have the opportunity to submit questions using the Q&A button located on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will answer these questions at the end of the webinar. We will allow for a period of time to field those questions at that time. So let's get started. As we begin to prepare for the new school year, we were very excited to develop our 4 standards, which would guide our program development. Ms. Borzello, you have championed a whole child approach to meeting these standards in your schools. Can you tell us a bit about what this looks like in action?
Thank you, Dr. Bolton. Again, I am Carrie Borzello, Senior Director of the Help Group Schools and Head of Summit View School. To answer your question, from a distance teaching and learning program to clinical services to social opportunities to parent engagement, in response to this novel situation, the Help Group Schools created a comprehensive virtual version of itself designed to focus on the whole child. Neuroscience research confirms that a whole child approach is not only desirable, but necessary to ensure that children learn well, especially children with special needs. The brain's capacity develops most fully when children and youth feel emotionally and physically safe, and when they feel connected, engaged, and challenged. As a result, our distance learning program was created to involve far more than academics, with a strong focus on relationships, identity, emotional understanding, and overall well-being. Our focus was academic, emotional, and social. In addition, we knew that our students would need to continue learning essential skills such as self-regulation, time management, self-advocacy, organization, problem-solving, and being able to adapt to the ever-changing digital world we live in, which they certainly have received a crash course in. With teaching and learning, we knew that our nuts and bolts would transfer to remote learning. Small class sizes, specialized teachers, differentiated curriculum, as well as the added support from teaching assistants. So the first step was to assess and ensure that everyone had the necessary resources and technology. We did this through home surveys and drop-offs. We then had to ensure that we had an effective platform for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Having experience with Google Classroom, which enables teachers to create an online classroom area in which they can manage all the documents that their students need, we opted for this platform. Students and teachers work collaboratively within the environment on projects and assignments, as well as communicate through the platform. We have not only seen an improvement in our students' executive functioning skills using this platform, but it also helps prepare students for their post-secondary experiences in college and the digital world in which they will continue to be a part of. It was then a matter of implementing the synchronous learning of real-time teaching via Google Meet, a video conferencing application that can be used along with Google Classroom to allow for real-time teaching and learning. Our distance learning schedule was designed to mimic what students would experience if they were on campus, with students going from class to class daily. The regular and consistent communication and contact with their teachers was important. Keeping in mind screen time, as well as the learning needs of our students, we peppered sensory breaks throughout the school day. In addition, a segment of the day consisted of office hours, during which individual needs were addressed through additional support, tutorials, and labs. It was important that our distance learning program encompassed our multimodal approach to teaching and learning, including robust discussions, collaborative work, video and audio clips, hands-on exercises, and individual work time, as well as student-led activities and presentations. Many of our students benefit from innovative classroom tools for sensory support, including ball chairs, resistance bands, foot cycles, and squeeze toys, so that our students could benefit from the same tools and accommodations they use while on campus. We provided such resources for them to use at home as well. In addition to our robust academic program, we were able to maintain school-based counseling, speech and language, and occupational therapy service. Prior to COVID, 80% of students in the United States reported feeling stressed at school. When students are overwhelmed, they are more likely to act out and have difficulty adjusting at school. Developing students' social emotional skills teaches them how to manage stress, while also boosting social skills, collaboration, and empathy. Our clinical program, social emotional curriculum, as well as our mindfulness program, have been critically helpful for our students building these skills and managing these difficult times. Service minutes are being provided via Zoom or Google Meet. Students are able to participate in both individual and group sessions, as well as request additional time if they are in need. Virtual schooling and social distancing has led to intense feelings of isolation. In an effort to keep our students connected to one another and virtually foster a sense of community during these difficult times, we knew it was important to create an abundance of social opportunities. Opportunities for students mirrored what we typically see on campus: clubs, themed dress days, after-school enrichment opportunities and activities, we also knew continuing to hold the events that are especially meaningful to our community was paramount to honor our tradition and students. It was also important for maintaining a sense of normalcy. So we held virtual versions of our sports banquet, science fair, pet day, and of course, graduations. We certainly enjoy celebrating milestones. So that consisted of 6th, 8th, and 12th grade virtual graduations. We had a commitment to the class of 2020, and throughout the spring, and rightly so, a great deal of time was devoted to lifting these students up, honoring their accomplishments, and recognizing them so that they wouldn't feel even greater loss and disappointment. So that entailed mobilizing the troops and staff, dropping off senior gifts, as well as the class of 2020 yard signs that became so widely recognized across our nation. And of course, their well-deserved diplomas. Like our students, our parents benefit from community involvement and outreach. Regular communication, as well as offering tutorials and the necessary virtual programs, have been instrumental in keeping our parents and guardians connected. Grade level chat groups, roundtable meetings regarding students, principal chats were beneficial to keeping parents well informed. Virtual meetups revolving around interests and hobbies were organized as well. Social opportunities for families, including movie nights, bingo, and parent night out gatherings, were incredibly helpful for maintaining our strong sense of community. We knew pretty early that for our program to be most successful for our students, we would need to maintain a strong partnership with our parent community. At this point, I have the pleasure of turning the spotlight over to a current Summit View West parent, Chris Johnson, whose son Matthew is entering the 11th grade, to provide a parent's perspective on distance learning and what it has meant for Matthew.
Hi, good morning. I'm just a parent, so I can't speak to how beautifully Dr. Bolton and Carrie have, but I can just speak to the experience that my son Matthew and I have had, both through the help group in Summit View and through the distance learning program that they've developed. Just a little bit of background. My son started at Summit View in the 7th grade, and at that time he had a 2nd grade math level and a 3rd grade reading level. He was very isolated, disconnected. His self-esteem had been drastically affected. And so when he got to Summit View in the 7th grade, it required a tremendous amount of catching up. And it was the suggestion of the principals that I stop hovering and that I leave him completely alone to learn on his own, to accept his own executive functioning, and to create his own accountability, which I did. And it was extremely hard. Summit View uses Google Classroom, which puts all the documents and sheets and everything that they do online. And they've done this from day one with Matthew. And then they use Blackboard for all the grading systems. So Matthew's able to check his own grades, check his own assignments, and then be completely accountable for his work online. And this has been something that's been ongoing and very, very successfully. So throughout the years, Matthew's slowly been able to catch up. And it's been an extraordinary journey for us as a family and for him. He just had a talk with me one night. It's hard for me to even talk about without getting teary, I have to be honest with you. But he said, I just want to be around other kids that learn like me, that think like me. I want to be in a place where I feel a part of. And I can't even tell you how deeply this has changed his life and my life, being in this environment. When distance learning started, obviously we had a lot of trepidation because Matthew was doing so well. He had improved so tremendously from where he came from. But the executive functioning and the increased responsibility that he had been able to encounter during his journey at Summit View, and he's a typical Gen Z kid. I mean, he's on Snapchat and Discord and YouTube and Twitch, and he's a gamer, and he has different groups of friends that he communicates with on these platforms. So he's native to these things, to communicating in a digital way. So when distance learning started, because of the fact that it was already so integrated with a really strong technological platform, the staff and the teachers were just as personable and deeply engaging and funny and everything as they were in the classroom. And I'd never even monitored a class, honestly. He wouldn't let me in the room, but I could hear from the distance him laughing. And during gym class, he's doing push-ups on the floor. I mean, he was being encouraged in a way that was so deep and so powerful. And as a result, Matthew's grades didn't go down with distance learning. They went up. And he wasn't getting breaks. This wasn't some scaled distance learning. This was real school. He was being really challenged. And his grades across the boards went up a half to an entire letter grade with distance learning across the boards. And I would say that my son has had to learn every lesson the hard way. He's been allowed to fail. He's been, encouraged to keep his own hours. And as a father, it's been really hard for me. I'm a sole custody single dad, and allowing my son to fail isn't easy, especially where he's come from. But the encouragement that I've received from the principal and the teachers has allowed Matthew to engage in a really, really deep and meaningful way. And distance learning has, at least in our opinion, prepared him for college, prepared him for the workplace, prepared him for journeys that even being in a classroom couldn't have done. So the way Summit View has handled this, at least in our lives, has been an absolute miracle, and we're extraordinarily grateful for it. And this isn't some sales pitch, I got to be honest with you. This is just a dad talking from his heart. We couldn't be more grateful for the experience that he's had in the transition to distance learning. It was absolutely seamless for us, and it's been an absolutely extraordinary experience and an absolute blessing. And it's been handled with decency and dignity and enthusiasm and compassion, the way everything at Summit View is. So I guess that's all I have. But so I hope this was helpful.
Thank you so much, Chris, for talking from your heart and for sharing Matthew's distance learning story with us. We're so happy that he has done well, but are even more grateful that we have families like yours to partner with at the Help Group. It's obvious that you and your son are the heartbeat of the work that we do. So again, thank you. Before we continue, I do want to, a few people have commented, I do want to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar and it will be available on our website after its conclusion at www.thehelpgroup.org. Okay, moving along, Dr. Krasnow. I know that you are a proponent of project-based learning to address our standards of engagement and individualization. What kinds of challenges have you faced in trying to provide project-based or applied learning opportunities in a distance learning environment?
So thank you, Jason, for the question. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Alice Krasnow, Director of Online and STEM Education for the Help Group. The question is, how do you keep kids engaged in an online environment when they're isolated from their peers, from their teachers, and from their supporting service providers? For a number of years, I've supervised schools serving students with a variety of social and learning differences, including autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, high anxiety, major depression, OCD, and more. What has been most meaningful to me is the way in which students of this population respond when their interests and passions are excited, when their abilities and challenges are respected, and when their various needs are accommodated. What I'd like to present to you is an account of some of the ways in which we engage students online while also accommodating and supporting them. I believe that learning should be active rather than passive. Students should have the opportunity to build and explore, to press the limits of their own understanding by experimenting and applying what they know, and finding out what works and under what circumstances. Active learners can apply what they know. Passive learners cannot. Active learners learn from their mistakes. Passive learners just absorb what they're fed without a clear sense of how to apply what they've learned. So the question then becomes, how does one engage in active learning in an online environment when the students are physically isolated. What's often overlooked, however, is that teachers can use the same or similar strategies online to the ones that they used on-site in brick and mortar. With modifications and accommodations, they serve as well online as they do on-site. Here are some examples of these, things that we've done. Discussions and debates. This last spring, we held an online town hall meeting sponsored by the history teacher to explore the burgeoning civil unrest centered on racial inequality. The Zoom conference call was packed with high school students and faculty, all eager to express an opinion or to learn from someone else's. Such events are golden opportunities for students to actively learn while honing their ability to think critically and reason logically. In an active classroom, instead of the student asking the questions, the teacher does. That provides the subject for individual student research and the grounds for a discussion or debate. Such discussions are supportive of students' social needs. They need also to interact with their peers and with instructors. They need to express an opinion, to agree, and to disagree. This can be arranged in any subject because there are controversies, areas of rich disagreement in every area of knowledge, from biology to artificial intelligence. The teacher prepares the questions to start the discussion going, then stand back and let students, a small group of students, press their positions. Projects are also an integral part of instruction. They test the students' understanding in ways that memorization and tests often don't. They provide an opportunity to explore how things work in the real world, to apply what's being learned, to build and make something, or to solve a real-world problem. Let me give you a few examples of how we were able to take projects that we would have normally done in brick and mortar and apply them in online learning. So here you can see this is an air racer. This child made on his own at home. We did mail a packet of resources to him, and you can see the kid scooting along beside the air racer, clearly excited that this is something he did and built himself. So this child, this is also at home. Perhaps your son's room looks like this also. This is a Rube Goldberg machine, which, as you know, is an attempt to build something which really performs a very simple task, but in as complicated a way as possible. So in this case, we did not send any of the materials home. These are just things he had lying around, and he made his own Rube Goldberg machine. Student resources are limited to what they have at home. So where specific materials are required, as in the one example you've just seen, we send packets of materials home. We've done dissections over Zoom for a class of seniors taking physiology and anatomy. We have had younger children make air-powered racers, which you've just seen. We've taught them math and coding using Minecraft for education. And if you're looking at a clip of Minecraft for education, in this particular case, and we do teach coding with Minecraft routinely. As a matter of fact, we're going to again in the fall. And this example here is of a graduation ceremony, which is being coded for. So bear in mind that all of this takes place in a class of 12 to 14 students, all with their own challenges and strengths. The teacher has to manage the students and guide their behavior in such a way that they can practice their own independence and self-reliance while knowing that support is at hand. Independent studies are also a way to encourage individual interest and excitement, to tap into the student's motivation and guide the study or project to something meaningful. Mini lessons are the perfect vehicle for direct instruction and then should be followed by some activity on the part of the student, an opportunity to apply the concept or skill just learned. Students, especially those of our population, cannot listen to a lecture for 45 minutes to an hour, let alone take it all in and benefit from it. They're too distractible, and often oral learning isn't their preferred method of learning. 80% of the information all of us take in, we take in visually, yet we persist in teaching to students' ears, in talking at them. Being action-oriented, giving them the opportunity to make and do is even more important online because of their isolation. If you're not engaging them, they'll find something else at home that will. Alex, for example, is a student with ADHD to the degree that there's so much going on in his head, it's difficult for him to focus. But his passion is electronics, mechanics, and coding. By giving him the opportunity to learn something new in any of these areas and then apply what he's learned, we can engage his interest and leverage it into related and unrelated areas. Puzzles and games, particularly math grid games, are further examples of how to engage children in learning, which doesn't seem like learning. Sudoku is the classic example. It helps reduce anxiety and stress by engaging the mind in a focused problem. It requires logical thinking, focus and concentration, improves memory and recall, things we're trying to develop in our students anyway. The levels of these at all degrees of complexity are used for students of all ages to strengthen their ability to reason and to make logical connections. Reggie, for example, is a student on the autism spectrum with a very strong visual and spatial sense. He tested strongly in math, but was unmotivated to do better than average. However, his single passion was solving Rubik's cubes, of which he had many. Solving the cube faster and faster became what motivated him, not only to achieve for himself, but to teach others. It requires persistence, working through mistake after mistake while not being discouraged, determination, as well as strong pattern recognition, qualities which Reggie excelled in. Incidentally, if you have Netflix, there is a new documentary called Speed Cubers about kids who compete annually for the World Championship in speed cubing. The documentary stars two kids, one of whom is on the autism spectrum and has significant social challenges. I don't want to tell you any more about it because it's truly it's a gem of a movie, and I would highly encourage you to see it. That's where you can learn about speed cubers and using Rubik's cubes. All of the above activities that I mentioned can be engaged in remotely, and we have. There are some students who have been hard to motivate, who are reluctant to enter a Zoom conference because of anxiety or being too self-conscious. One such student with ASD, Max, was very depressed. His mother's an essential worker and so has to leave him with grandparents, both of whom are older and ill. Another student, Alicia, needs an inordinate amount of individual guidance, instruction, and reassurance due to chronic anxiety. How do we manage such students in online learning? We've responded by providing, in both cases, a higher level of support. We set daily schedules which map out for the student what they need to do and when. An administrator calls daily to ensure the student is on track and has everything they need. And we work with service providers, counselors, OT, and speech if the problem is one of the wellness or the mental health of the child. We engage the parents too to ensure that they're coping and suggest resources where necessary. In closing, I want to mention that our understanding and methods are evolving with our students and their needs as circumstances change. Their success is what drives us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krasnow, for describing the importance of applied learning to encourage engagement in your students. Those examples were really fun. Dr. Stevens, the help group is committed to equity, and we wholeheartedly believe that every student, regardless of ability, deserves a quality education. What were the challenges you faced for students who required substantial to very substantial support to access their distance learning curriculum?
Thank you very much, Dr. Bolton, for inviting me to be here. I'm Dr. Lori Stevens, and I'm the Senior Director of Autism Programs for the Help Group. And I think your question is really a good one because designing distance learning classes for students that we're going to describe as non-independent learners those who, like you said, require substantial to very substantial support in school has been one of the most challenging tasks, not only facing the help group, but facing all educational programs across the nation that are serving these students. And these are students who might have myriad challenges, such as behavioral difficulties, communication difficulties, and significant academic difficulties. They're students who typically do not function independently within the classroom and might require individualized support, one-on-one support, or extra resources. And so for all of us, this has really been a new path that we had to forge because there was no evidence-based curriculum or teaching methodologies that exist in order to provide distance learning for children who have an autism spectrum disorder or a similar disorder, again, where they require very substantial support within school. So what I'd like to do is be able to address some of the challenges that we faced and then also be able to talk about what we've done in order to address them. But I also want to be sure to say that we are learning right along with our students and our parents. Our program is ever evolving. We do not have all the answers yet. And we know that distance learning can be extremely challenging for children who are non-independent learners. And like you said earlier, what we're really looking to do is trying to make the sweetest lemonade that we can out of the lemons that we've been given. And we think we've got some strategies that might be very effective for all students. Our programs continue to be data-driven, and they're highly individualized to meet the needs of every student during these difficult times, the same way that we would do in the classroom. But the most important thing for us is that what we found is face-to-face contact with the teacher, with the aides, with the behavior interventionist, with the support providers is really the key to having an effective program. We know that many children on the spectrum and non-independent learners oftentimes don't do well with just being given a packet, let's say, to fill out or to just read a book, maybe to watch a video and try to learn directly from the video. They do much better when they have active and direct face-to-face time with the person that they're learning from. And so that means that our teachers have had to spend a lot of time in various different Zoom rooms and Google Meet rooms, along with all of their support staff, in order to be able to provide as much face-to-face time as possible for each one of our students. And this is the most effective way we know to teach the ASD population through a distance model. We know that our students also thrive on routine, predictability, and structure, and all of that kind of changed and went poof as soon as we went kind of overnight into quarantine, and suddenly everything changed for them. So what we thought was very important, and we kind of made a mandate, was that as much as possible we were going to work to provide the same structure, the same routine, the same materials, and the same systems that were in place in school, and provide them within the home. And this way, the students were able to feel a little bit more comfortable. They knew that the same routine was in place. They knew what was going to happen next and could kind of rely on that. We also worked with parents to structure their child's day and to systematically be able to increase the ability and amount of time that they're able to be engaged. We had students engaging with their teachers, with their aides, with behavior interventionists, with support staff, all service providers, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, counselors if they have them. And in this way, we were able to offer a more tailored and individualized curriculum. And in keeping the structure the same, we helped students to feel more comfortable and know what was about to come. Because this was a novel situation for not only us, but of course for our students, we started off by doing social stories to explain what the coronavirus was, why we had to be in quarantine, why we had to wear masks, and tried to work with our students so that they were able to understand and have a little bit of comfort and relief in terms of what was the meaning behind this sudden change to their daily routine. We also continue to provide, like I said, all of the support services, but we also provided recess for our students during the school day. We provided enrichment activities like art and music. Basically, everything that they were provided in school, we attempted to figure out how are we going to provide this through a distance model so that they were still having a full and enriched day of school. So for children who could not sit in front of a computer in the same way that they were able to sit in the classroom for a full day, we tended to break their day up with the help of their parents. So a parent may have chosen, let's say, to have their child get a break from the computer during our recess time. And then what the parent oftentimes would choose to do was have the child attend our enrichment class, which was called Fun and Fitness, which was held after school for a 30-minute time period. So the students were still able to get in their exercise, but maybe they needed to take that break off the computer when there was not structured academics like math, reading, and spelling that was going on. So we worked with the parents in order to be sure that the student was able to access everything whenever they were able to, and was able to have some time off computer, but was able to get back onto the computer to finish their day. And so that meant that adaptability and flexibility are really the keys in working with this population and trying to provide the best programming. We also made sure that we provided as much parental support as we could. We know that this is a situation where oftentimes parents have been put in a teacher role, more so than they typically would be. And what we wanted to do is make sure that our teachers and our support staff are still the ones who are providing the lessons and doing the teaching, but we wanted the parents to be in a support role and to feel like they were able to help support their child in this learning, in this new learning model in a way that best suited them and they were comfortable with. So sometimes for parents, they weren't able to speak with our teachers or check in during the day. So our teachers oftentimes agreed to talk with the parents before school or late in the evening when it was convenient for the parents. So again, we tried to be flexible with what the family needs were. We also provided daily or twice daily check-ins for every family. So the teacher and the parents were able to communicate about what was working, what wasn't working, what might need to be changed, and how the student was responding. We were also there with our behavioral support staff to help the parents handle any behavioral difficulties that may have been occurring and to provide behavioral support as needed. And we offered parent groups where the parents could get together and themselves share ideas amongst themselves about what was working and any type of resources that they may have had that they felt they wanted to share with other parents. And what was interesting is that many of the parents had commented to us that they actually enjoyed the higher degree of collaboration and consultation that was occurring, because as you know, oftentimes what happens with special education students like ours is they get on a bus in the morning, they go to school and they come home, and the parent and the teachers don't get a lot of time to actually meet face to face and again to just get to know each other. And so our parents commented that they actually enjoyed getting to know all of the school staff much better and to really getting an opportunity to speak with them, pick their brain, if you will, on various ideas. And what really was wonderful for us was a lot of parents responded to us and said, hey, we never knew that our daughter could do that. We didn't know that she was able to sit for 5 minutes and stay engaged. And so it really helped. I think this was one of the silver linings, was the relationship and the bond that was formed between the entire family and our entire teaching staff. Another challenge that we have that we know particularly with our ASD population is that they have some pretty extensive attentional but also sensory issues, and we had to be able to address those. So one of the first things we did was we worked with the families on trying to find the right environment for their student to be in during learning time. So for some students that may have been their bedroom and that was where they were the most focused. For other students, they may have needed to move around the house because they just couldn't sit in the same room all day long. So some lessons may have been in the kitchen, some may have been in the backyard, whatever, again, was going to work for the family. And then we also made sure that the occupational therapists, were well involved. They sent home sensory diets that the parents could do at home. And we also made sure that the same sensory materials were available to the child at home that were available to them in the classroom. So much like my colleague Carrie mentioned in her talk, we had the same types of, whether it was a ball chair, whether it was bands, whether it was squeeze toys. So we had one child who her personal plushie was what she chose to come to school with, and she was able to squeeze it whenever she started to feel dysregulated, and that really worked for her to be able to have something from home actually with her in school to help her stay focused. We also utilize some attentional deployment tools. So for instance, for students who weren't used to necessarily attending to a computer, we may have had the parents put a large arrow on the computer to point to, this is where you should be looking, which is a technique that we use in our classrooms to help our students know where they should be deploying their attention. And we utilize that same method for the students at home. And then we also develop systematic plans to help students be able to focus for longer. So we would initially work with our students for a very short amount of time, and then we would gradually increase the amount of time that they were able to engage in a learning task prior to being able to get a break. And again, this is the same technique that we utilize within the classroom, and we just transferred it into the home. Another thing that we found that was kind of interesting is that for some students, just being home automatically reduced some of their stress and some of their anxiety and some of their sensory dysregulation, because they didn't have to worry about getting up early to get on the bus. They didn't have to worry about having to wear shoes or having their hair brushed. Certain things that we took away, students who may have been really bothered by unpredictable sounds that might occur in the school. You never know when one of your classmates is going to suddenly call something out or somebody's going to have a difficulty. And when you're at home and those things go away, we found that a lot of our students automatically were better regulated and therefore had more bandwidth in order to attend for longer periods of time. Another challenge that we encountered that both of my colleagues have addressed with their populations also were motivational challenges. So when you have non-independent learners, they're not always as motivated to engage in the learning task, and they might also have a difficult time engaging in a novel way to learn, which certainly learning on the computer was novel for many or almost all of our students. So we started off with some fun tasks. We may have changed the backgrounds that we had, our virtual backgrounds, to be something that we knew would draw the students' attention. And we just had them engage in some of the fun activities that we do in class that we know that they may have enjoyed, in order to get them to feel like this is actually kind of fun. And then our behavior staff also worked with the families in order to maintain the same behavior system or to modify that system so that it fit within the home. One of the things that actually, again, worked kind of nice was at home. Sometimes we have some stronger or more reinforcers available. So the family might have a trampoline or a swimming pool that the student could be working toward. If they got their work done, they could get trampoline time or maybe pool time. And those are things that we can't always provide at school. So this helped to really motivate our students. For some of our older students, we encountered what I think any parent of a late teen and early young adult encounter, and that is they just did not want to get up to go to school. Everybody was staying up later. They didn't want to get up. So in our vocational ed center that serves students who are 18 and above, we actually wound up starting the day later. We found that most of the students were willing to log on at about 10 a.m. And so that's when we started our school day. They still got a full school day, but we just made it later. And then we worked with them on good sleep hygiene, and we worked with them on self-care so that we could slowly move our start time closer and closer to the actual school time. But we met the students where they were at, and that's always going to be a key whenever you're trying to design a distance learning program or any academic program, is to meet the students where they're at and to start where they're comfortable and build from there. And then, one of the big drawbacks of quarantine is the lack of social opportunities. And I think this is one of the ways that the help group actually really shined, because we do teach social skills as a core curricular course in all of our programs. And those classes were maintained and continued to be taught through distance learning. So we were not only able to work on greetings, conversations, friendship skills, theory of mind, but it also gave us an opportunity to talk about the difference between socializing in person and socializing on the computer. It gave us an opportunity to talk about safety on the internet. It also gave us an opportunity to talk about, wow, what's the difference? How do you read cues and how do you know how other people are thinking when you can't see where they're looking, where you don't have as much body language cues? And so it actually was a really nice opportunity to take some of the skills we typically learn in the classroom and generalize them to a new environment, and to let the kids know that many of these skills still need to be applied no matter what social setting you're in. But we also offered a vast array of after-school classes. So we had anxiety work groups, we had social skills groups, interest clubs, physical activities like the fun and fitness. And we did all of this in order to allow our students to have social opportunities outside of the classroom also, and to maybe meet new people and to have opportunities that they weren't going to be able to have because there was no longer lunch and recess. And we opened these up to everybody. So we actually wound up not only having a national reach, which meant that our students were able to meet other kids like them that they might not normally have an opportunity to interact with, but we actually had an international reach, which was quite exciting. And we had kids joining us from all over. And finally, one of the most important things that we found was that we wanted to design distance learning plans for each one of our students. And I know that now this has become, I believe, mandatory for school districts, that everybody has a distance learning plan. But we actually started this way back in March. And it's important to know that the distance learning plan is not to replace the IEP, it's to enhance it. So the idea was we met with each parent, we went over the IEP, we talked about the priority goals that we wanted to make sure that we were hitting all of these goals, and we talked about the goals that we might not be able to address. So for instance, in the example that you see right now on the screen, we had some students who might have had goals for safety on a bus, on the school bus, and we weren't able to work on that when the school bus was not there, but we worked with the parents on other things that might be able to be done to help with safety goals if those continued to be an issue even outside of transportation. And we also would identify what was the best modality to present our information in, how were the students going to best react, and different things would work for different activities and for different children. So it all needed to be individualized, and how was the behavior modification system going to work. And so what I'd like to do to wrap it all up is to try and end with two really quick examples of how distance learning has worked with our non-independent learners. And I'd like to start off by telling you about one of our students who was a 5th grader in our Beacon program. And that's our program for students who have quite significant behavioral challenges. And this particular student presented with both an autism spectrum disorder and pretty severe ADHD. And once he was told about quarantine, he was quite adamant with his parents that he wasn't going to do any work at home because it's home. And home is for fun and play, and school is where you learn. And if I don't go to school, I don't have to learn. So the parents were very concerned that he was not going to be engaging at all in any activities that he had to do from home. He also was extremely distractible, and the parents thought, how are we going to keep him from playing with his Legos and doing all of this other stuff that's going to be available to him? So we started off by having our behavior interventionist and occupational therapy meet with the family and made sure that we transferred his behavior system, which was working in the classroom, and transferred the same behavior system, the same token system and reward system into his home, so he knew what to expect and what he was going to be able to earn for doing his schoolwork. But the biggest thing with this student was that what we actually found is that when we removed some of the stressors that he had about going to school, he developed a much broader bandwidth and motivation and desire to participate in learning from home. And that is, the student did not like to wear shoes. So we said, that's okay. You don't have to wear shoes. Nobody's going to see your feet. He also did not like brushing his hair. And we worked out a program with him where he would only have to brush the front part of his hair because he kept saying nobody's going to see the back of his head. And he was right. So he didn't have to brush the back of his head. And when we removed these things that were triggering for him, he felt much more comfortable to engage in the learning process. He also was bothered by a lot of extraneous noises and sounds. And so once he knew that the noises within his home were much more predictable, he didn't have to worry about other students having any behavioral disruptions, and he could really focus. He wound up, again, being much more motivated to engage. So it wound up that after a couple of weeks, this student was the first one to log on every day. He stayed logged on all day. He went to school in his pajama bottoms with his feet up on the desk and eating pancakes. And other than dripping syrup on his keyboard, he did a great job. He got all of his work done. And it worked out so well for him that his parents are actually thinking that now continuing with the distance model, even when we return to the brick and mortar program, might be the best way for this student to go, because he actually seemed to function better when some of those stressors and there was more predictability in his environment that was provided for him. The other student I want to tell you about is our student Iggy. Iggy is a student who's in our Sunrise program and who requires very substantial support. And he had a lot of difficulty with understanding why it was that he couldn't go to school. He was yelling and screaming and hitting every morning. He would put his backpack on and wait at the door trying to get in, trying to wait for the school bus, and didn't understand why he couldn't go. So we worked with his parents, and also his teacher worked with him on going over social stories about why we weren't going to school. The teacher wound up changing her background. Iggy is very interested in the solar system. So she changed her background to the solar system, and she would change it, and that maintained his interest and kept him wanting to focus and log into the computer so that he could see the various different planets and solar system and universal things that she was showing. And she was ultimately able to shape that so that all that she had was a globe on her desk that represented, Earth, and that wound up being okay because now the student had learned to really focus upon his teacher. We set it up so that at first he would have only 20-minute work periods, and those were divided into 5 minutes of work, 5 minutes of break, 5 minutes of work, and we slowly lengthened them so that by the end of extended school year or summer school, Iggy was able to engage for the whole day in all of his lessons, and he really enjoyed going to school. And his mother had said, she never thought that he would benefit from distance learning, but he actually did extremely well and would enjoy going to school every single day. And it winds up that one day Mom had said to him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said to her, "See solar system." And she said it was the first time that he was able to reflect upon the future. And it also showed how much designing the curriculum around his interest kept him interested and motivated and allowed him to have not only a growth mindset and confidence, but also to have a goal for the future. And what a wonderful thing to be able to provide a child who previously would have been considered a non-independent learner. So I hope that this will be helpful to everybody who is working with non-independent learners, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevens. Your examples definitely brought out our commitment to keeping equity alive. We do have some time now for a couple of questions. There are so many questions that have been asked. We're only going to be able to get to a couple. I do want to assure you that we will make this webinar available on our website. We will get it out to people so that you can watch it again or share it. And also, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us as well. There were a number of questions about speech and OT. I'm not going to go ahead and bring those up right now because we do plan on addressing speech and OT in a subsequent webinar in September. So you'll hear more about that. And I'll move on to some other of the themes that we heard. So one of the most common questions that was brought up by the audience today had to do with focus, attention, distractibility. Ms. Borzello, I think maybe this would be a good one for you. The question really is, when my child's at home engaging in distance learning and is really struggling with focus, what's my role and what can I do? And especially there's another complication brought in by many of the questions about parents who have to work right now. They are not home with their children. So what would you say to a family who has a child who is struggling with attention and distance learning and whose parents are working?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Bolton. Yes, and that is a situation facing many of our parents. So, first and foremost, there needs to be communication. There needs to be a partnership between parents and the school. So you want to reach out to your school administrators, your school teachers, to let them know your circumstances, to let them know your struggles, so everyone can work together to come up with a plan that will most effectively support your child. Relationships are important. Whatever relationship your child has with a teacher, maybe it's a science teacher, maybe it's an administrator, maybe it's a teaching assistant. It's time to call on those folks and let them help guide your child when you might not be able to support as much as you'd like to. It's also important to have structure for your child, right? Help your child come up with a schedule that will most effectively support him or her. And tools, use them, please use them. Planners, a to-do list, graphic organizers, whatever you can put in place that will help motivate your child. As I mentioned earlier, we are a Google Classroom school. All of our schools are Google Classroom, and it certainly helps with executive functioning skills and is a one-stop shop for helping your child access curriculum and work with teachers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Borzello. And it looks like we have time maybe for one more question. Another theme that keeps coming up is around social skills. So Dr. Stevens, I think this might be one for you. And I know you touched on this a little bit a minute ago. But the question is, how do you teach social skills and life skills within a distance learning platform?
Great. It's a great question. I think one of the nice things about social skills is that it actually does translate relatively well onto a distance learning platform. And one of the things, it's a talk for another time, is that social interaction is changing a lot for people. More and more people now are actually getting to know each other initially on a distance platform, right? So they might first meet through a dating app. They might first meet in a game chat room or something like that. So it actually makes sense to be teaching social skills also online, in my opinion. So I think you can still address, you can easily teach conversation skills. What you might need to do in a distance learning model is break your class up into smaller and smaller and smaller segments so that they can be having conversations. Certainly, if you have a classroom of 40 students, you wouldn't want all of them present trying to have a conversation because that isn't a typical model. But you can certainly work on what are the parts of a conversation. So if you were going to be using a train model and you were going to be talking about how, a conversation has to have a locomotive to get it started, and then it needs a coal car to fuel it, and then it needs all of the box cars that are all the things that you're going to say back and forth, and a caboose in order to end the conversation. Those things can easily be done and worked on through a distance model. And kids can still role play and take turns. I think what is interesting is to be able to also really focus on how do you know how somebody else is feeling and what they're thinking when you don't have as many visual and social cues as you typically would, and what are the things that you can do if you really don't understand what another person meant by what they were saying because you can't read their body language or something like that. And also it does give an opportunity, like I said before, to talk about safety in terms of being able to interact with people that you might not know that well. And I think in terms of adaptive living skills, let's say, these are the kind of things that the way we adapted this was if we were going to be working on, let's say, washing the dishes and loading the dishwasher, the teacher or whoever was running that lesson would go into their own kitchen and put their dishes away and have the student model it. If they're working on sweeping, then they would sweep. They would show each step one at a time and have the student model it. And then for students who were able to, they were able to watch the whole sequence at once and then model it. So because the teachers were also within the same environment, they were at home, it was much easier for them to be able to model, here's how we do these kind of things, folding the laundry, separating the laundry. And so those types of skills actually worked well also to be done through a distance model.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Stevens. We have come to the end of our time today. I want to thank Carrie Borzello, Chris Johnson, Dr. Ellis Krasnow, and Dr. Lori Stevens for sharing your expertise with us this morning. These certainly are challenging times, and we all look forward to the day when all our students are back learning on their school campuses. In the meantime, this is a time to focus on giving every student a quality distance learning education. At the Help Group, we endeavor to provide that to our students and to impart what we have learned to parents, other schools, and other communities. If you would like to learn more about our schools and programs, including our new global virtual school for students with special needs, you may go to our website at www.thehelpgroup.org. You may email our admissions department at admissions@thehelpgroup.org, or you can even give us a call at 877-943-5747. Also, please save the date for our next webinar, which will be held on September 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.